I've had the pleasure to work with Vinod in the early months of Future of Good, and it's also his first time here in Kelowna, BC. And I know he's really excited to be here and have this conversation with you all today. So please, everyone, give it for Andrew and Vinod.
Thanks, T. Now you can get your coffee. Vinod.
How are you?
Good. So good. I have barely slept this week, and I'm doing cartwheels. How are you?
That was a good cartwheel.
Hey, we have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, both girls, Sierra and Finley, and they need to learn cartwheels from someone. It's me.
Can you do a handstand?
I haven't tried yet, but that's it's on the agenda. I can see it coming.
Okay.
It's definitely coming.
Okay.
You were showing me some pictures last night of handstands.
Yeah. So my 8-year-old does wicked handstands. So she could totally teach you.
Okay. Next Ottawa trip?
That's it.
Okay. Let us pick up where sort of Kelly sort of invited us to. She talked about a couple of different concepts. Why chiapt, eskim, esquis. That's as best as I can say. So we are all one. We share one skin. We're one memory. The concept also of what's behind us and what's in front of us. How do you sort of pick up on that as we look forward at the opportunity of social change?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Andrew, for the invitation. Really excited to be here in Kelowna. My first time, as T said. I had an amazing 10K run this morning along the water. That was absolutely beautiful. It's super windy though. Super windy. I don't know what you were talking about last night, where this is not a windy city, but I was quite literally blown away. But it was an absolutely gorgeous view, and so I'm really excited to spend some time here. And thank you, Kelly, for welcoming us to your ancestral homelands. I was sharing with Joel here, as part of the exercise, that so my ancestors come from India, and I was born there, but I left when I was about 2 years old. And there's one thing that my grandfather told me, my maternal grandfather, who passed away due to COVID. And he said to me, I was in my late teens, I think I was in grade 11 or something, but anyways, on one of the visits to India, he said to me, some people are here to give us answers, and other people are here to give us questions. And you're here to give us questions. And so I really hold that very closely as I think about the triangle, as I look forward to my children, and the kinds of questions I can give them. So one of the ways I sort of want to frame this a little bit is that the massive opportunity of 21st century social change for me is a world in which we are fundamentally trusting the systems we live in, fundamentally shaping the systems we live in, co-creating the systems we live in. And we're all, humans, non-humans, all flourishing because of the systems we live in. And we are living in a profound time right now. This is not a once in a generation opportunity. This is a once in a 400-year opportunity for us, where there's a huge invitation to reimagine worldviews, mental models, systems, all of it. All of that we have known for the last 150 years that has brought us a lot of prosperity, but also a lot of suffering. All of it. We're at the time now where it is a 1 in a 400 year opportunity of reimagination.
What's bringing us to that point now, as opposed to the generation before us or a few generations in front of us? Or is this an opportunity for every generation?
I think there's a couple of unique things that are bringing us to this place now. One of them is the way we saw the world is not how the world actually exists. And Kelly talked about this. This is something that Indigenous communities have known for thousands of years.
Like Kelly's thesis.
Or Kelly's thesis. We've all just ignored that and crushed it and all of it. But the world is highly, highly relational. Highly relational. It's highly interactive. We've ignored relationships. We've ignored interactions. We've compartmentalized everything. We've commodified everything. And that is the view of our world, where everything is in boxes, everything has labels, everything is commodified, and everything is compartmentalized. So when you do that over many, many hundreds of years, you end up in a place where you simplify a whole bunch of complexity, which we have over and over again. And when you simplify complexity, you create a ton of blind spots. And all of the interactions are completely lost. They're there. They're still there. Like, life wants to live. The interactions and relationships are there. But we tune them out. We intentionally tune them out of our lives. And so, and now, this point in time, we have the extraordinary possibility, opportunity to re-engineer so much of that and take us back to what folks like Kelly have opened us up with. And that is go back to a highly respect the relationships and the interactions, because the future is not compartmentalized. The future is not siloed, it's not commodified. And so the time we're in is a very unique time. And we have the extraordinary awareness, we have the extraordinary global connection, and all of that has led us to see how intricately connected our planet is. Like, it literally takes a planet to produce an iPhone. It takes a planet to produce an iPhone.
Unfortunately, more than one planet is
More
kind
than
of
one
the path we're on.
Right. But we're living like we have 7 planets.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I want to talk a bit about that, but maybe we'll
get to that.
We'll get to that. But our consciousness now is, we're starting to tune back into a more planetary consciousness. And that is the opportunity in front of us. And that's the time. That's the invitation. The question is will we do something about it?
I'm here for the doing. So in a sort of moment of opportunity where we center on relationships, we've got lots that we don't have to learn, we really have to relearn. What are you seeing sort of through the lens, really, of what you listen to a lot of through your work at Future of Good? What's giving you hope here? T sort of mentioned it earlier about we're not very hopeful right now, and Kelly brought it back to saying, it is the work together that gives us hope. kind of threads are you seeing that we deserve to be hopeful about?
Yeah. T's right. The StatsCan survey last year was troubling, worrying, and the trend line is that this is going to continue to decline unless we actually do something about it. So, very personally, I struggled with this a lot the past many years, and I encourage everyone to sort of take up this practice, or at least give it a go for 3 weeks. So I do a daily hope journal, and it sounds a little, but trust me, it works, and I love it. So every night before I go to bed, I write down in my little notebook 3 things that gave me hope that day. And small things, big things, personal things, professional things, all kinds of things. Right? And it matters. It really matters. These micro doses of hope in our everyday life matter. This is what propels us. It fuels us. I mean, places like this, communities like this, are absolutely extraordinary. Just to take in, I look around the room, and I've only been in the room for about 15 minutes, but there's so much hope here. Extraordinary creativity and ingenuity here. All of this should give us hope. But we, T mentioned, we see this every day at Future of Good. We see both sides of the social impact world. We see the extraordinary creativity and ingenuity across the country, coast to coast to coast, and that gives us so much hope. And we cover it, right? That's a big part of what we do is solutions journalism. But then there's the other side, where because the social impact world has undergone so much transformation and change, there's so much pressure that it is facing, and we have to cover that too. So, I'll give you one specific example that in an area that is very close to my heart. And are we recording this, by the way?
We have a video live right now.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I will be careful about what I say.
I would urge you to be honest but careful.
Honest but careful, yes. No, this is actually so. I was gonna talk about a cause that's very close to my heart, which is women's rights and gender equity, and I'll pause there in case this goes beyond these walls and people close to me find out. And this is more of a safety thing. So that's a cause that's very close to my heart because of a whole bunch of things that I experienced and witnessed growing up. And funny enough, my daughter, Simi, was born on International Women's Day. Right? So it's a big deal in our family. That day is a big deal. It's her birthday, March 8th. It's a big deal, but it's also International Women's Day. And so every year we talk about how far we've come and how much further we need to go. And we've covered a lot of stuff at Future of Good on this. We hosted a massive summit a couple of years ago on this. And when you think about from a systemic level, there is some extraordinary work happening. There are big funds, like Equality Fund, as an example, that is like almost $400 million now, and directly supporting grassroots movements in Canada and around the world. There is the Indigenous Peoples Resilience Fund, also led by 2 extraordinary grandmothers, phenomenal people, right? And then you have all kinds of other things that are happening. You have social enterprises like Behind Bras. You have social enterprises operating in Nova Scotia that are working with incarcerated women. You have a whole bunch of really interesting work happening at the public service and policy level with gender-based analysis, embedded in policy development and policy making. You have, feminist recovery plans, economic recovery plans, and development plans. So there's some really, really interesting things that are giving me a ton of hope. And then I look at the leadership across the country. How many, we could use a lot more, but the extraordinary leadership of women in the impact investing space, in the social entrepreneurship space, it's been phenomenal.
I mean, the movement is vastly led by women.
Right.
Like, thank you. Let's do more.
Yeah.
That is the movement.
Right. And so, yes, lots more, and there's there's so much further to go. But just in the last sort of 5 to 6 years alone, there is so much that gives me hope. Just in this one cause alone, right? And then you can open it up to food insecurity and mental health and housing and a whole range of other things. I saw Happy Patty. I think Happy Patty is speaking later today. They're doing some extraordinary work. I feel so hopeful when I listen to the work that they're doing, it's ventures like that right across the country. Give me a ton of hope.
It's I think getting out into spaces and rooms, focusing on the solutions journalism. We are thirsty for some of that hope. It's hard. It's easy to sort of focus on the hopelessness as you sort of stick into the street level of the sort of issue you're working on or overlapping issues. But that sort of like pause to look back at how far we've come. It's kind of a nice tradition with your daughter.
Yeah, it is, and we forget. It's just so easy to focus in on what isn't working, And I remember when I used to work in the international development world. One of the things that we did is one of my colleagues took a beautiful photo of one of the largest slums in Nairobi, and I would take this around to folks that I would talk to, and this was partly shifting mental models. I would put this up. I would put up this photo, and I would say, "What's right with this picture?" And that would, because you look at it, there's so many things that you could say that's not working. Right? But there's a lot that is. But that's a muscle we all have to build. Because and Dee mentioned it, right? This is right across the country. It doesn't matter what province you look at, from PEI to BC, Ontario, right? It's on the decline. And there's so much that's contributing to it. So what are those habits, those practices that we can do? Whether it's looking at things and kind of what's right with this picture, or journaling, or being in spaces and in communities like this. All of it.
So let's talk about scale and sort of add into the conversation here. A lot of the places we find hope are arguably small compared to the depth or scope of the overlapping problems. So we're in systems that are fragile at best and built on Band-Aid after Band-Aid. You mentioned in the opportunity, what is the opportunity for system and social change right now? And that is a real reimagination of sort of people-powered systems. And in the social sector, I learned early and often that scale is sometimes, when we talk about language, people don't like that word. It doesn't, scale doesn't have to mean big, necessarily. So what is sort of scale? What does a positive view of scale look like in what's in front of us?
Yeah. So very quickly to answer the question around language. Scale to me, and this is where I think we'll have to really shift our thinking back to your first question. Scale is not about big. Scale is about addressing it at the right level of complexity. And we're in a really unique moment in time in that we've just, we've come out of a global pandemic. And most of us have forgotten this, but the world has changed. And much also has not changed. But very distinctly, there is what I call the before COVID era, or the BC era, and then there's the after COVID era, which I call the AC era. But we're still transitioning from the BC era to the AC era, and so much has changed. Yet it feels like nothing has changed, right? Let's talk a few numbers. For the first time, really, I think in my generation at least, we talked about caregiving. We talked about how we care for our elders. This was never a conversation in the BC era. I mean, it's kind of absent now as well. We talked about it for 18 months, right? But nevertheless, it opened up a window for us to really think about, what does care mean? What does care for the elderly mean? What does that look like in our homes, in our communities? And I tell you, you talk about fragility. If every caregiver in the country took a week off, the whole system would collapse by noon on the first day. That's how fragile our care system is. Let's talk about mental health. Another thing that we really started to talk about in a big, big way through the transition from the BC era to the AC era. Kids' cell phone, which is one of many crisis lines across the country, if you just look at children and youth, their demand shot up 500% in the AC era. Unimaginable. How are we in a place where that is the level of demand, right? We talked about climate last night. Extreme weather events, globally.
Well, when you looked across the lake this morning?
Right.
Yeah.
Right? And globally, extreme weather events have costed us $16 to $18 million every 16 minutes in the last 2 decades. So this is the scale, and I don't mean big, I mean this is the complexity that we're in, right? And lots of folks here, we've talked about, and everybody's sort of talking about, growth in GDP. You mentioned it. Others have sort of talked about it. Yes, but if you really drill down into the numbers around externalities, like if you were to price in externalities, 90% of the S&P 500 would be unviable. The only reason they are viable is because someone else is taking care of all these externalities.
Everyone else.
The planet's absorbing it. We're absorbing it. Philanthropy's absorbing it. A whole range of actors and stakeholders, humans and non-humans, are absorbing the externalities.
So what does a positive view of this scale look like?
We're at a time where we have to. The challenges that we face today are non-stationary in that they're evolving. They're going to continue to evolve. And they're highly connected to everything that we do. There's no singular approach of, I'm going to address this one thing and here's my little widget to address it. And then that will create the systemic change that I'm looking for. It's not how it works. And you mentioned Band-Aids. We're surrounded by Band-Aids. Just look around you. And there's lots of entrepreneurs in the room, and so I'll mention this as a very concrete example. Some of you may have been a part of or heard of the SEBA loans, right? And SEBA is a symptom of a deep structural failure. And we never really tried to deeply fix the access to financing challenge, which is highly complex and highly relational and highly intersectional. And so what do we do when we haven't actually addressed the challenge at the scale of complexity? Things like this come up, and so now we have to put a Band-Aid on. And because people need support. And so the fix there is SEBA. Who designed SEBA? Anyone know who designed SEBA? No one knows.
ChatGPT.
Might as well be. No one knows who designed SEBA. Who comes up with stuff like this? Right? Like, someone or something came up with it. No one seems to know who came up with it. And no one can seem to access it. It's not like you can go to your local credit union and get a SEBA loan. That's not how it rolled out. And so now, we're in a place where SEBA's sort of kind of been okay for some people who already had access to capital. But if you were struggling with access to capital, this was totally off the table for you. And now most people can't pay it back. And so where do we go from here? How are we actually understanding and getting deep insights into the challenge that is access to financing?
I think that's when you say how, like, increasingly we find that the change is happening here in small rooms, in small communities, in small initiatives, and it's not happening, in the MP's offices, the MLA's offices. There's definitely some policy shift needed, required, but the solutions, I think, in the picture that you're painting, aren't coming from top down, they're coming from here.
Right. And you know how when you opened, you said take up space? Yeah, take up space, like lots of space.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. These are where the solutions are happening. And they're happening across the country. But there are very few channels to take up space.
Yeah, and so when we talk about scale, I think that's our collective challenge here, a collective problem is, in many of the system problems that we're all sharing, some sharing worse than others, and feeling worse than others, we have the solution. Many of them put together, but we rarely get those to scale. We get them to share. We get them spread across many organizations and many communities. Like some of the structural challenges, in particular around nonprofit scaling, are real. Christy and I were chatting yesterday. You can't even have a charity that's like, producing what assets? Performing assets is the sort of language in the law. And that means like a trust can't own property that produces profit from rent without exception. And it's just like...
But Andrew, who came up with that?
Exactly. So I think that's the opportunity here. People built these systems. We might not be able to name who, but people can change these systems.
Right. And that is the opportunity of today, is the deep questioning and showing alternative models that make some of these things, whoever came up with it, don't know, don't care, but it's obsolete. It doesn't work. It doesn't fit the world today. And so we're at a time where we need that deep questioning. We're at a time where we actually have to address problems at the scale of complexity that it exists in. Because, we're in Kelowna. This isn't a unique thing to Kelowna, but across the country, every community is facing an affordability crisis.
Yeah.
And some communities are way worse off than others, but it's across the country. And there are this is where Band-Aids have brought us, Andrew. People and families are crowdfunding basic needs. You can go on GoFundMe and you will read hundreds of stories of people crowdfunding for rent, cover heating bills, diapers, etc. This is not working. The systems that we've built are not working. They were stretched and strained like decades ago. And we're at a place now, this is where Band-Aids have brought us. People are crowdfunding for basic needs. And that category of crowdfunding for personal needs is the fastest growing category on GoFundMe.
That's a sorry state.
This is why addressing problems at the scale of complexity matters.
So this is hard work. Here, many of us, all of us, are in some way working on these system problems, and I'm sure you're looking at your pile of work in front of you, and it's like, oh, when am I going to have time to address the complexity of the problem? Because you're sort of dealing with the day-to-day workings of your organization, your role, your family, your community. So when we get back to making space and taking space, I think that's perhaps the hardest of the make space sort of invitation. Make space for this complexity. Otherwise, we're just going to keep band-aiding it. I'm going to ask you a last question about storytelling. I have some other questions, of course. I could go on for a long time in this, but let's open it up, have some dialogue here. If somehow there's no other questions, then I will of course ask more. But let's talk about storytelling. And you are a storyteller, a good one. Sometimes it's depressing, I have to admit, but really important to listening. The solution side, you talked about both the solution side and the inequity, the complexity. I think it's important for us to hear both. So what is the role of story in the system change here as we look forward?
I think stories have a massive role to play. Kelly mentioned this at the very outset, and this is how we feel as well at Future Good is people pay attention to stories because stories are one of the oldest learning tools around. It predates every other learning tool we have today, from trainings to workshops to reports to research to a whole bunch of other things. And journalism, and folks like Discourse and do some extraordinary work on this. Journalism has a very unique ability to bring out the complexity and to bring out nuance, lived experience, historical context, signals, fringe solutions, all of it, which there's not a whole lot of other tools out there that can do that in the same way and make it extraordinarily compelling to listen, to watch, to read, to take in. And so stories are one of the best ways you can change hearts and minds.
All right. I'm with you. I really feel every day for the same problem I just mentioned, make space for thinking in the complexity. Make space for the story. Make space for the relationships that we've been chatting about today. I think this is the challenge.
That is a challenge, and you know, one of the things that I'll sort of say here a little bit is the invitation is for one of systemic imagination, right? And it's tough for us because a lot of us tend to think in products and widgets and service offerings and those kinds of things. But really zooming out and imagining what is the systemic change that I'm contributing to, that's the invitation. And you know, there's all kinds of change makers out there. There's two change makers in particular that we need to support even more. And those two types of change makers are justice seekers and future builders. And I want to talk about them.
Justice seekers and what?
Future builders.
Okay.
Okay. These are just terms I came up with.
Okay.
It's not backed by any academic research. Although it probably should be if anyone wants to do a PhD. But there are folks who are justice seekers and there are folks who are future builders, and there are very few people who are both. But usually you're one or the other most of the time. And justice seekers have risen and continue to rise, and rightly so. Many, many decades of systemic negligence has brought us to this place. But here's the key distinction between justice seekers and future builders. Justice seekers, and this isn't sort of a right or wrong thing, there's just two different kinds of change makers. Justice seekers, who we need, are focused on better equality in the same system. So, more brown people on boards, more brown people in houses, more brown people getting loans. You get my point? That's the focus. And then you have future builders who are modeling and experimenting alternatives to existing systems and models that make the existing models obsolete. So what are new government structures? What are new ways to finance? What are new dimensions of housing? And so we need both. And there is a tremendous opportunity now for us to, we've sort of, you know, and rightly so, this is the way we should have done it. We have really prioritized justice seekers, and there's been a ton of support there, fantastic. But that alone is insufficient. And so, for the folks in the room who are impact investors and funders and so on, really look at how you are balancing justice seekers and future builders. And I want to kind of just mention a couple of things related to climate, if that's okay, because I think it will illustrate this point a little bit. Another massive, complex challenge. The Economist put out a really, really interesting study a little while ago, and you can look at it. It was a global study, but you can disaggregate it by country. But it looks at the last sort of 75 years of GDP, and so you can look at Canada, and you can say GDP sort of like past 75 years. It's kind of like it's grown, and then they overlay that with carbon footprint, also grown, and then they overlay that with consumption, also grown. This is not a viable future. No level of justice seeking is going to change these curves. Like, we fundamentally have to, we're not going to consume our way out of this mess. So we fundamentally have to reimagine and build a very different type of system that makes our models of consumption obsolete. And
Here to that.
well, I mean, I don't know if folks, I'm sure everyone knows who's here. October is Circular Economy Month. If folks know? Yes.
We're at 420 parts per million today, I think.
Right. Right. So but that's the sort of the systemic imagination that's required here. Right. Those curves, we can't have those curves in the next decade.
Yeah. There's an Apple ad kind of flying around the internet.
Which takes me. So just on that, can I throw another elephant in the room? I can just put it out there. Well, you know, for folks thinking about interventions to the climate crisis, I think there's consumption is one elephant in the room. Another, I think, is worth really examining is when we look around us, in our homes, in our communities, in the spaces that we occupy, what should be unownable? Like, look around you, to everything that you have. What should be unownable?
I've got a few ideas. A gas car, fossil fuel powered heating and cooling, the beachfront over here, a bunch of the land. It's all, I know there's some private developers in the room, private developers taking it up for the people in some ways. There's a real, you know, if you look at the sort of concept of the donut economics, there's a real call out to not just redistribution of wealth, but redistribution. And that sort of unownable bit speaks to making sure that there's community wealth built into not just capital. Like, you know, the easy answer is give more money to the people. And it's just like, okay, sure. But what about the wealth? What about the land?
Right.
What about the trees, the water? There's some serious questions around, to your point, what is ownable privately versus owned in the commons.
And who gets to decide? Right?
Well, the nice answer is we get to decide. We get to decide our future.
Right. And so, and that because you talk to even folks like my parents, because this is a very complex question. You talk to folks like my parents, and I'm sure others feel the same way, is they would say, no, like, we want to build generational wealth, because that was stripped from us for many, many generations. So, again, going back to this question, in relation to the climate crisis and a whole bunch of other crises that we have, what should be unownable?
An important question to ponder. Does anyone else want to join in with a question? A thread? Please.
Check. Hi, my name is Eden Finde. I'm with Indigenous. I'm the publisher. Thank you. But I loved what you said, Vinod, about what should be unownable. I would argue that everything should be unownable, from homes to lands, to vehicles, to information. And I would also furthermore argue that everything already is unownable, but we've created this myth that we own things that are actually not ownable. Really all we're doing is controlling them in the short term and controlling access to them. But we're all gonna die, everyone in this room is gonna die. So you can't own. When you disappear, that thing doesn't disappear with you, right? That's forever. The land is forever. Water is forever. And so I just wanted to offer that perspective.
Thank you.
Yes. we could go on for a long time about that, I think. Let's spend some time on that today.
I have a question. Earlier on in the conversation, you had talked about taking a picture of a slum and looking at it and saying, what's for? Can you tell me what the value of doing that is and what the expected outcomes when you do find things that are working?
Sorry, what are the expected outcomes
If you do identify things that are working.
Yeah, thank you. The value is shifting a mindset from looking at things that aren't working to looking at things that are. And the challenge, particularly in the INGO world, is it's easy to look at, whether it's a photo or to arrive at a place and look around and kind of go, well, you know, that kid's doesn't have a shirt on, and you know, I don't really see any electricity running there. There's no running water over here, and there's a whole bunch of garbage over here. It's so easy to pick it apart and to look at all the things that don't work, that aren't there, that are missing. It's hard. It's excruciatingly difficult for people to look at the same picture and go, what is right here? What is the good that is happening? What is here that we can build on? What is here that we can empower more of and encourage more of? And that shift mentally is hard for a ton of folks, especially in the INGO world. And so the purpose of that exercise is to force people to actually put the question in front of them. And when you say, what's right with this picture, it forces them to look at things they never saw before. And they will see that there's a family there. They will see that, oh, these two kids are playing. There's play there. Oh, there's actual shelter here, and it's working. There's people who are working in the farm. There's food there. There's things that actually work. Then there's tangible things, and there's intangibles. And it forces them to look at it in that way. And that helps their own mental models when they go into these spaces to not to come in with a view of deficiency, but a view of, here are all the assets that I see.
Thanks for your time and your insight. Lots of things to think about. One that came up in my mind when you were talking about who are the people that are making the decisions. Vinod, you talked about SIBA. Andrew, you talked about nonprofits, legislation that impacts nonprofits. And who are the people that can make the decisions to change that? And I just wanted to provide one recent example of good where I think positive change will come out impacting the affordable housing crisis and the legislation that the province of BC just passed restricting short-term rentals. I still think it's a bit of a band-aid solution to a bigger problem when we have big platforms. The extractive economy has gone from natural resources like mining, forestry, to the digital exploitation of community resources. Hundreds of platforms extracting billions of dollars, jobs and affordable housing from communities. How can we change that?
It's a really, it's a, sorry. So, yes, if one more person talks to me about units, I will flip. I will flip. Because that's what we've reduced this problem to. is a unit problem. This is not a units problem. You could add another 100,000 units, you still won't solve the problem. But it's reduced to a units problem. And it is far more complex, as you've outlined. And this is it. All the platforms that you're mentioning, yes, being extractive. And this is a question for all of the investors in the room. How do you drive equality when you're hunting for unicorns? How do you drive equality when you're hunting for unicorns? This is a question for all of the investors to keep in mind. And for you to ask of your own portfolio companies, of your own ventures, what is the quality of your profit? Not how much, but what is the quality of your profit? Because there's little guarantee that the profit that you earned didn't stem from social or economic harm. So the question for me is really drilling down into these things. And this is how we stop this extractive state that we're in, that you're talking about.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, Vinod. You asked a provocative question there, Vinod, and around what should be unownable in our communities. And so I hope you can just draw the line, because we're here at a money event and an impact event. So can you kind of draw the lines for us to perhaps posit for us, how we might think about those two things as existing together? Like, so if we're talking about impact investing, social finance, how do those kinds of concepts exist around a question about what could be unownable in community? Like, how could we do those together?
Well, one answer to that question is circularity. And really thinking through, again, like, the commons and circularity are probably two things that I would offer. There is a ton of really extraordinary work happening in the commons space that I would look to for lots of inspiration in every sort of facet of our life possible. And I think it's phenomenal. I think that we saw. This is not a new thing. We're talking about this as if like commons and mutual aid and all this type of stuff is just like it just like sprang up in the last few years. This has been around for tens of thousands of years. So I think we really have to fundamentally strip away our assumptions. All the things that we have kind of concocted and built and designed around impact investing is basically borrowed from another sector. And we've borrowed the good and we've borrowed all of the bad things as well. All the things around, credit checks and due diligence, all of this stuff still exists. There's very little that we've actually stripped away and fundamentally changed. So the onus is on us, because if we don't question this stuff and actually change it, the trauma and violence that we will set up for our kids and grandkids, that's going to be excruciatingly painful. So I would invite everyone to really deeply question the assumptions that your work is built on, and look for inspiration like the commons, like circularity, a whole range of other things that you can actually bring into your work.
One more, we're done for now. A final?
One more.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Who is it?
My name is Caroline. Archie. I'm Shane Shishwa from the Williamsburg area. And I really want to thank you for asking that question, what do we own? We were taught from our ancestors, my elders had taught myself that we are all people of the land. It is all of our responsibility to take care of our land, to be protectors, and to only, we were taught to only take what we need, and to also living in poverty. Our currency was trading. So if, a family needed meat, we would trade them with medicine. And I really want to thank you for helping me look at unfortunate situations in a more positive way, because as soon as you asked us, what do we own? And how to look at a picture, or how to look at a situation differently. The first thought that came to my mind is I was on Facebook, and in Lillooet, the Statlium when I first looked at the pictures, it was devastating because our salmon aren't able to swim upstream to spawn. And the Statlium people were doing everything they could to help our salmon naturally swim upstream to spawn, because looking at the pictures, it was devastating because there's no water. There's no water for them to swim upstream. And driving back home to my home community and looking at the water, there is lack, our rivers. And, I just really wanted to thank you for that, helping me look at, a heartbreaking situation, and, the opportunities. When I rethought about that picture that I saw, I was like, that picture is also showing how we are banding together to help not only each other, but to help our four-legged and our salmon to get there where they need to go, so that way they can help continue to feed us. So I want to thank you for that, Coach Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those reflections, Carol. So thank you, Vinod, for this conversation, and many others, and many more to come. That sort of look backward to what you and I have experienced together, and to look forward to all of us. I do hold hope for our future. Some of these conversations are hard, but there is a lot to be hopeful for in this work together. So as we look forward for the day today, we have our first sessions coming up. We have a short break until 11:15. In this room, we will have the social entrepreneur stream, impact investing for social enterprise and impact organizations. So you can expect to hear from several folks who are building social enterprise. They might not call it that, but the intent is there. And you will hear also about their journey into accessing capital. There are quite different sort of models in discussion, and you will hear some different sort of ways for that capital to happen. In the impact investing room, sort of in the classroom in the back, we're going to hear about emerging patterns in impact investing. So it's a few impact investors sharing some of the work that's going on and some of the patterns that are showing up. And out in the front room in the gallery, we, in the ecosystem builder track, we're talking about measurement and moving from outputs to outcomes. So lots of good conversation coming up in the next hour. After which we will have lunch. You can expect T and I to come back on stage at the end of lunch at about 1:15. So please expect that. We'll sort of bring the group together and talk a little bit about some reflections from the morning, as well as the plan for the afternoon. So please take that hour over lunch to enjoy, connect, discuss, have dialogue, and enjoy the balance of the morning.
But before we go, can we please give a round of applause to our first conversation this morning?